The natural state with Jean-Luc AYOUN. Agapè by Bed Yourself. Part 10. October 14, 2020. The natural state can never be an effort. Remember that what I am saying has nothing to do with work to be done, but is something that is established quite naturally without any effort. Well, then, I will talk to you about the clinical signs of Agapè's natural state. As a preamble, I would like to make it clear that when you're in the natural state you can't ignore it at all. It is the recognition of what has always been there. So the one who lives it, there is no doubt, he may have doubts about his health, about what is going to happen, but not about what he is. Besides, it's quite funny. If I can say that in the last 2 years I must have had thousands of messages, these people who ask me if they're Agapè. But it's often the same answer. Only you can recognize yourself. Recognition is immediate, just I can tell you. So, if you ask anyone if you were there, well, simply, that means you are not there. On the other hand, there are a number of clinical signs, symptoms that affect all areas of a person's life. I will try to give you this clinical picture. Symptoms that I can see in myself as well as in all the brothers and sisters who are going through the same thing, who evidently don't ask themselves if they're Agapè because they have recognized themselves. But the cartography, the signs, the manifestations of this natural state are always the same. So this clinical picture that I am going to draw up is to give you elements about yourself in order to identify within you whether some of these signs are present or not. I insist on the notion of the permanence of these signs within some fluctuations that are obviously linked to the circumstances of life in this world. But this clinical picture gives you all the criteria that are permanently active in this natural state. So what does it give as symptoms? It gives first of all a new feeling for the beings of a kind of fluidity, of ease. You're obliged to notice after a certain time that everything in your life goes effortlessly. Then of course, there is resilience, something else. There are faculties of adaptability, of new adaptation that the person can only notice. Another aspect is benevolence, thoughtfulness, availability for what is happening, a clear vision of the ins and outs, the echoes and effects of what is happening. This is not mediumnity, it is not clairvoyance, but it is simply something that is observed in all areas of life. There is what is called an availability for oneself, but also for all the circumstances we go through, but also for all the human beings we meet, even unknown ones. There is no projective component, there is a spontaneous capacity to be there, that is not in thoughts. Attention is much more reliable. The smile is most often permanent without necessarily trying to smile. Emotions that can occur like any human being, because it is not a question of not having an emotion, but what is characteristic of these emotions is that they have no effect on memory, that is to say, you do not attach an emotion experienced in the present to any past event. These emotions have no effect on the memory and especially no effect on the body. Indeed, the normal human being, whether it is anger, sadness, in the vast majority of cases, there are physical symptoms to this emotional state. The emotion is lived, but it does not impact the body. There is a decoupling of the effect of the emotions and the mind, even we will see it on the etheric body, so there are no symptoms. When someone is very stressed, they may have a knot in their throat, in their stomach, and this is something that almost doesn't exist at all in an individual in a natural state. So another thing that will seem strange to you for those who are not yet living it, perception is direct, it does not go through cognition, it does not go through the perception of an energy or even through a vibration. I was talking about direct perception that does not pass through any vision, that does not pass through energy or vibration. That corresponds roughly to what No Eyes described a few years ago, without eyes, which is the direct vision of the heart. It's a little bit the same principle when I tell you, I speak without thinking, I let thoughts unfold without any intervention. It had been called, I believe by No Eyes, the vision of the heart. Then one also clearly notices a kind of flattening, of regulation of the salient reliefs of the personality. The biophysical stability that I was talking about in neuroscience, The stability of temperament and personality is such that whoever lives it cannot make a mistake. There is one before the natural state and there is the natural state. The other is always lived as a fragment of oneself. Remember that what I am saying has nothing to do with work to be done, but is something that is established quite naturally without any effort. The natural state can never be an effort. At the emotional level we also see what is called in sports psychology of an English word called flow, F-L-O-W. We talk a lot about it in sports, because all sportsmen and women, especially in individual sports, are very good at identifying these moments of flow, and the sportsman or woman tries to reproduce it. I will give you the precise definition afterwards, but in its natural state, the flow is almost constant. When you lose it, you feel it instantly, and the rectification of the thoughts or emotions present at that moment brings you back into the flow spontaneously. So the flow is the athlete to whom everything succeeds. For example, for a tennis player, because I also like to work a lot in sports psychology and in sports coaching, the athlete who has lived it once will never forget it. It is the moment when he transcends his technique. It is the moment when the shots are released spontaneously, and all real, professional athletes live with all these trainings, these mental or other preparations to establish this flow. Because when you are in this flow, the neurobiological efficiency is maximum. The flow is this maximum neurobiological efficiency. The movement of the arm and body for tennis is like a dance. Everything seems easy, everything succeeds to the sportsman. So in sports psychology, we try to work not on technique. In general, these high-level athletes master the technique, but like them, they are not in a natural state. They try to re-trigger this state through techniques that we call mental preparation. It is a cognitive therapy technique where the athlete will try to connect, to revive those moments of flow that he has lived in the past or in the present instant. Uses breathing techniques, visualization techniques. In short, this is the work of the mental coach or mental preparer, who today takes a predominant place in the accompaniment of athletes. So for those who are in a natural state, the flow manifests itself spontaneously, and it simplifies life, because the synchronicities, the gifts, the readjustments of the self are done by themselves, without effort, unlike sport. In fact, the maximum neurobiological efficiency is a state of maximum efficiency with minimum energy expenditure. That's why athletes who are in the flow do not feel tired. They bathe in a bath of endorphin, and for them to in those moments, in a bath of dopamine, which I remind you is linked to the search for novelty. This is when the athlete is closest to the present instant. In all sports they tell us the same thing, so as they don't often know the word flow, they all tell us the same thing. I live this match in a state of grace and ease, without any effort. Unfortunately for the sportsman, it doesn't last. It is a little bit like the one who is in the natural state. Grace is almost constant at all levels. The mind no longer directs the person. It is seen for what it is, a tool that serves us when we need it to understand things we want to understand. But apart from that, the mind no longer secretes ideas, thoughts. It will strengthen the availability in the present instant. The body, whatever its age, recovers a harmonious functioning. I call this flexibility and elasticity. Indeed, there can no longer be anxiety, there can no longer be stress, whatever the nature of the stress, of course, because stress represents several causes and several expressions. I don't have time to go into the details of this. Just know that there is good stress and bad stress. We speak in English of eustress, or the opposite of distress in D, then in the good stress. Interruption. I was talking about direct perception that does not pass through any vision, that does not pass through energy or vibration. That corresponds roughly to what No Eyes described a few years ago, without eyes, which is the direct vision of the heart. It's a little bit the same principle when I tell you, I speak without thinking, I let thoughts unfold without any intervention. It had been called, I believe by No Eyes, the vision of the heart. Then one also clearly notices a kind of flattening, of regulation of the salient reliefs of the personality. The biophysical stability that I was talking about in neuroscience, The stability of temperament and personality is such that whoever lives it cannot make a mistake. There is one before the natural state and there is the natural state. The other is always lived as a fragment of oneself. Remember that what I am saying has nothing to do with work to be done, but is something that is established quite naturally without any effort. The natural state can never be an effort. At the emotional level we also see what is called in sports psychology of an English word called flow, F-L-O-W. We talk a lot about it in sports, because all sportsmen and women, especially in individual sports, are very good at identifying these moments of flow, and the sportsman or woman tries to reproduce it. I will give you the precise definition afterwards, but in its natural state, the flow is almost constant. When you lose it, you feel it instantly, and the rectification of the thoughts or emotions present at that moment brings you back into the flow spontaneously. So the flow is the athlete to whom everything succeeds. For example, for a tennis player, because I also like to work a lot in sports psychology and in sports coaching, the athlete who has lived it once will never forget it. It is the moment when he transcends his technique. It is the moment when the shots are released spontaneously, and all real, professional athletes live with all these trainings, these mental or other preparations to establish this flow. Because when you are in this flow, the neurobiological efficiency is maximum. The flow is this maximum neurobiological efficiency. The movement of the arm and body for tennis is like a dance. Everything seems easy, everything succeeds to the sportsman. So in sports psychology, we try to work not on technique. In general, these high-level athletes master the technique, but like them, they are not in a natural state. They try to re-trigger this state through techniques that we call mental preparation. It is a cognitive therapy technique where the athlete will try to connect, to revive those moments of flow that he has lived in the past or in the present instant. Uses breathing techniques, visualization techniques. In short, this is the work of the mental coach or mental preparer, who today takes a predominant place in the accompaniment of athletes. So for those who are in a natural state, the flow manifests itself spontaneously, and it simplifies life, because the synchronicities, the gifts, the readjustments of the self are done by themselves, without effort, unlike sport. In fact, the maximum neurobiological efficiency is a state of maximum efficiency with minimum energy expenditure. That's why athletes who are in the flow do not feel tired. They bathe in a bath of endorphin, and for them to in those moments, in a bath of dopamine, which I remind you is linked to the search for novelty. This is when the athlete is closest to the present instant. In all sports they tell us the same thing, so as they don't often know the word flow, they all tell us the same thing. I live this match in a state of grace and ease, without any effort. Unfortunately for the sportsman, it doesn't last. It is a little bit like the one who is in the natural state. Grace is almost constant at all levels. The mind no longer directs the person. It is seen for what it is, a tool that serves us when we need it to understand things we want to understand. But apart from that, the mind no longer secretes ideas, thoughts. It will strengthen the availability in the present instant. The body, whatever its age, recovers a harmonious functioning. I call this flexibility and elasticity. Indeed, there can no longer be anxiety, there can no longer be stress, whatever the nature of the stress, of course, because stress represents several causes and several expressions. I don't have time to go into the details of this. Just know that there is good stress and bad stress. We speak in English of eustress, or the opposite of distress, in D, then in the good stress, interruption. Interruption. Good stress increases alertness, increases motivation, increases pleasure, joy. For distress, it is exactly the opposite. You lose your means, you are less efficient, the mind is less clear. Stress management, whether for individuals or for companies, is an essential knowledge. As I have the time, I will describe the different types of stress. So, independently of good and bad stress, we also determine a global stress level. We determine cognitive stress. There are people who are very good at it. It is their own thoughts that generate stress independently of any stressful situation, and, above all, another important element. What is the nature of your response to stress, and that is independent of the amount of good stress or bad stress. This was found a very long time ago, by a researcher called Henry Leverett, who said that when faced with a stressful situation, the individual has only three choices, as I have already mentioned: escape, struggle or denial. It is the denial of stress that triggers this terrible disease that we call burnout. There you go, I could talk to you for a week about stress. When we talk about stress globally, you should know that it is totally correlated, it is totally in line with what we call in medicine oxidative cellular stress. When you are stressed, there is a change in the body zones, organs, functions, a modification of the cellular metabolism, which leads to what is called extracellular oxidative stress, where the local pH becomes acidic and, if this stress lasts, will then trigger a phenomenon of secondary alkalinization and the appearance of chronic or degenerative diseases on the body zone of the body schema that corresponds to the stress. So much so that today's approach to stress management, takes this into account, and therefore, we can correct stress, certainly mechanically, chemically, but not on the causes. It is called in this phase of acidity of the body the antioxidants that regulate stress in the body and, by resonance, lift the stress lift. Understand also that in the natural state all that is necessary and useful happens spontaneously. It is a state of grace where there is no room for action/reaction. Suffering is no longer active at the level of the being. Certainly pain can exist, physical pain, but there will be no suffering, whereas classically in every human being, suffering is pain and pain is also suffering. The pain of the natural state does not imply any suffering, but it is the same pain. As I told you earlier, there was a decoupling of emotions that no longer causes damage to the body, and therefore there is no more oxidative stress, which explains that whatever your age when you're in the natural state, your body literally rejuvenates. All the facial features that were related to the stress lived under stress disappear. All the physiological functions become different. There can no longer be any impulses, even sexual impulses. Sexuality is liberated from impulses, and it is an act that is consciously decided. There is no more search, no more desire, there is no more search for pleasure, there is an almost permanent satisfaction of all that is. The physiological nutritional needs change completely. I have a meal every 3 days, what I call a real meal. The need for calories is extremely reduced. All addictive behaviors are extinguished by themselves. The pleasure of that moment is in simplicity. It is the enjoyment of the present instant and the ability to be free of all collective, social and moral contingencies. There is no need to look for any morality because, whether you want it or not in the natural state, everything is moral. Interruption. Anyway, I said pretty much everything I wanted to say. I was into physiological changes. The amount of sleep needed is greatly reduced, all the needs no longer exist. There is simply the pleasure of deciding to make love, to eat, but it is never hunger that drives us or desire of any kind. Desire, in quotation marks, is totally free. That's what I had to tell you about this general state. I could actually define it more precisely, resilience and all that, but you have definitions everywhere. The natural state is lived as a permanent gift of life. You'll let everything that happens come to you. You are no longer in control as a person, and you have become the intelligence of light. Then of course, all this is valid for those who do not feel the energies and vibrations. In the same way that when you feel the energies and vibrations, there are a number of manifestations for those brothers and sisters there that are a warmth in the rib cage, cardiac breathing that seems to happen in several stages and no longer in 2 stages, a state where one is often on the verge of shivering ecstasy. There is no longer any need or desire to meditate, to pray, to do anything. Your life is prayer. You're at that moment in inner freedom. You are forced to find that all areas of your life lighten even if you are dying of an illness. All these signologies, all these clinical signs, I have really spotted them in all those who are awake in a general way and without effort. We see clearly, without image and without vision. What I was explaining, that is to say that everything that takes place is a film, a theater scene, a video game in which you're an actor, of course, but you are not fooled by what you play. You clearly perceive it as authentic, as truthful, as whole. Whether you want it or not at that moment, whatever your previous personality was, humility and simplicity are more and more evident. Pleasure is natural, it is taken in living this natural state. That's the big picture of this state. So of course, for those who have been living the energies that have been feeling them for years, there is the activation of the three crowns. The crown of the head, the crown of the heart and the crown of the sacrum. You perceive the wave of life, which is a vibration that starts from under the feet and goes up through three different circuits in the legs, on each side to merge with the sacrum. You easily feel the energies flowing through what is called the Kundalini, which is called the channel of the ether. You don't need vision, you don't need a scenario, you don't need to plan and anticipate unless, of course, you have to travel, buy a train ticket. That's the normal logic. So here are the main lines of what I wanted to tell you. So, before I start answering the questions, I will try to change the device. Translator. Okay Jean, look. We're waiting for you. Interruption, internet problems. Well, now it looks good. Good, so now we'll let you have the floor for questions about what you want, the natural state, of course, but anything you think might be useful. New interruption. Translator for Christina. In line with the situation that Jean-Luc was talking about earlier, in relation to addictions, there are participants who ask if the vice of tobacco has to do with personality. So I'm going to answer you like Biden. In the phase of vibratory rise from 2008 to 2013, I couldn't smoke a cigarette, I couldn't drink coffee, I was gluten intolerant, and I was a vegetarian. Today, I don't have any problem with any of that anymore. I give myself tobacco when I feel like it, knowing that it is organic. That's it. But again, it can't be an addiction. The last example to date, we went to Peru in February, and it was imperative to stop smoking in order to be able to go up there at 4,000 meters, and not to miss breath in Machu Picchu and elsewhere. So I simply stopped smoking a fortnight before to do some walking. I did not smoke at all during 3 weeks, I did not feel any lack. So tobacco has nothing to do with personality. Biden died of throat cancer. Well, it's not even because of tobacco, it's the famous Biden's, Indian cigarettes with eucalyptus that cause more damage to the body than tobacco. Tobacco has not prevented Biden from being free as far as I know. On the other hand, it is evident that the vibratory rise, the access to the supramental, goes very badly with tobacco, but when you are free, it changes absolutely nothing. I repeat, in the natural state, there can be no addiction of any kind. There can be no more addictive mechanisms. That's what we see, we haven't made any effort to live it, it's self-evident. We can go on. Translator. There is someone asking us if you can define resilience for us today, in this stage. Resilience, so here I invite you to look at a French psychiatrist who is very well known, who has written books on resilience. He's even the one who has not created this word, but who has brought it up to date. This psychiatrist is called Boris Cyrulnik. So, keeping it simple, because obviously when it comes to resilience, we also know what changes occur in the brain. To put it simply, resilience is when you are at your lowest point in your life, a certain number of things are lost or are changed abruptly, permanently, rapidly. Resilience tells us that human beings are never as good as when they are at their lowest point. In slightly less psychological and less psychiatric terms, resilience is the ability to bounce back. It is the moment when suffering is transmuted into a search for novelty and when the need for reward, these are terms I used on the first day, is magnified. Flow was the perfection of a given moment. We took the example of the athlete. Resilience is the moment when you're at your lowest point, when survival reflex circuits come into action and allow you to find the energy, the mind and the emotional state to get back up the slope, as they say, to get out of that state. It has nothing to do with fighting, it does have a little bit to do with self-confidence. In the natural state, it's not self-confidence, it's confidence in the intelligence of light. It is also the surrender to the light, the sacrifice to the light, the apparent sacrifice only, of our history, our goals and our projects. It is the light that has the project and establishes the project for us according to its intelligence, not according to our skills or intellect. This is why I have repeated to others countless times, you are not your life, but you are life. Passing from your life to life is really the sacrifice of the illusion of being a person. Of course, the person will be there until the last breath, but the totality of the person, body, personality, soul, spirit, is led by the light. This is grace, this is letting life unfold, this is experiencing and feeling this joy without purpose. You're at peace most of the time. As I said, it doesn't stop me from getting angry if I have to get angry, but it doesn't in any way destabilize the Agapè state. The energetic and vibrational perceptions, which, of course, I have been feeling for a long time, no longer interfere with consciousness at all. Everything happens without me, but through me. This is what I can say about resilience. It is an aptitude that can be developed, but here we come into coaching techniques, accompaniment, which are not possible to evoke here. You know, I could give you a week's webinar only on emotional intelligence or resilience, but that's not the point today, we don't have too little time left. So another question. Translator. What is the difference between waking up and awakening? Awakening is living experiences. The NDE, the near-death experience, is an experience, not a state. It's something that happens at a given moment, which is obviously deeply transforming, but these people who have near-death experiences, are still convinced that the beings of light they have met, the family members who have died, Christ, Buddha, Allah, whom they will meet, are still in the belief that this is real. So of course, it is transforming, because when they come back, they are not afraid of death, they feel this love, but they are not living the natural state. This is an awakening. The awakening is when you live the absolute, the dissolution of the consciousness and the return, if I can say in Agapè. The big difference also, when you're awakened, you believe in the beyond and you have no way of understanding that what is called the beyond is also the world of death. This is called the astral. All near-death experiences, without exception, except for those who have passed through the light, are still in illusion. They are convinced that they are going to meet their parents, that they are going to meet Christ, Buddha or Muhammad. They have clearly not experienced that this astral world they see, is even more the world of death than ours. It is also the prison. All these ghosts who present themselves in the guise of members of our family who have died, always younger, always more beautiful, or when we see Jesus, we feel extreme love, or Buddha or Muhammad, it doesn't matter, but this extreme love is of the order of feeling, which is a love conditioned by form, it has nothing to do with the love that we call Agapè. There are indeed some beings who have passed through these empty ghosts, these so-called parents, families, or beings of light. They pass through these ghosts, they pass through this intense source of light that doesn't burn but warms, which is the sun, and they pass to the other side of the Sunday. There are very few people who are not fooled by ghosts, because obviously the ghosts will show you your life, they will tell you, this is good, this is not good. They will tell you, you see, you have to come back to earth. They are still under influence, there is no autonomy there. Those who went to the other side of the light, they are not great mystics or people who felt the energies, but they are still people who had a great habit of finding their way in space. Airplane pilots, helicopter pilots, astrophysicists, and so on. This is awakening. Awakening consists in understanding and living that there is no awakening. Awakening is yet another dream, and when you live the awakening, you are no longer fooled by your past experiences, even the most transcendent ones. I have explained to you that I have spent years going out of my body, not in an astral body, in a body of light, not mine, any body, like a suit that I wear. Everything that seemed so beautiful, so extraordinary at the time, is totally unreal. There is no world, there is no time, there is no space, there is no one. Bida said it's a theater scene, Ebba and I call it a video game. Everything is programmed, nothing is free. Awakening is a substitute for awakening, a copy, a fake of awakening. In awakening, you're overloaded with visions, images, scenarios, vibrations. It is the spiritual trap of the self into which all the masters of the last century have fallen, especially the so-called ascended masters who are only the puppets of the soul. It is the spiritual myth, the spiritual swindle, the offbeat or oblivious light, but it has nothing to do with truth and reality. I understand that what I am saying can be very violent for those who still have these perceptions and beliefs, but rest assured, we all go through this stratum. I myself channeled most of the ascended masters a long time ago, and I believed in them as strong as I am. But when you're awakened, there is no longer any hold, no possible adhesion to these forms, to these beings, who did not know themselves that they had been trapped. They talk to you about love and wisdom, they talk to you about evolution, they describe the psychology of the soul to perfection, but they don't live the real thing at all. They do not manipulate us, they are the ones who are manipulated. They are persuaded to be in the truth, they are seduced by the worlds of form, by killers, but they do not live anything of the truth. This is the essential difference between awakening and awakening. For those who do not yet live in the natural state, all this seems very real. But in the end, when you live the natural state, you know that it has always been there. And in conclusion, since the absolute, you can't even talk about awakening or awakening anymore, and I like the terminology of Bernadette of Montreal, all this astral, all these beings are in the world of death, all the 99% of the channels come from the astral. When I began, not to channel but to express the beings, I never spoke of channels, and the term did not even exist. The best proof of this is in my book called Contact with the Worlds of Light, which I wrote more than 20 years ago, where I already explain all this. The word canalization did not exist, and I was talking about overcrowding. Afterwards with Ramatan, one of the governors of the intra-earth, I went through a very special process, and I won't hide from you that at that time I wasn't really awake, and I sincerely thought I was going crazy. That is to say, from one moment to the next, I found myself in another body, living in this intra-earth body, in a dolphin body that stood vertically in the air, more than 2 meters high. I felt this body where there were no joints, especially the fins, it was cartilage, but no bones in a sense, like us. Meanwhile, when I was in Ramatan's body, he was in my body. The first time, I asked to be locked up in psychiatry, because it was so confusing, so surprising. Afterwards, I got used to it. So the walk-in process that was called directional, or bidirectional, consciousness, it's something I lived and perfectly assimilated, which is part of the appearance of a path until today. But as I say and reaffirm today, all this no longer interests me. Only the natural state is present. I don't need all these scenarios, all these worlds and all these dream worlds, to be myself. All this is cinema that conceals the truth from you. There is no one. And the earth here, in this period, is really the place of the confrontation of reality and illusion, the alpha and the omega, the first dream and the last dream that are here on earth. Another question. Translator. It seems to me that Jean-Luc has already answered this question, however I will do it anyway. She's going to ask a question that is perhaps the continuation of what you just said. Okay, I'll do that. Translator. What is the role of guides and angels and those who accompany us in the world of dreams? So already let's turn the tide. We all said that angels, archangels, beings of light accompany us. It is time to understand and live that it is we who accompany them. The angels, the archangels, the world, the devil, this is what we dreamed. There is no one. And for someone who has channeled angels, archangels, and all the archetypes, it might sound strange to hear that. especially since, when the one I called my guide, who has always been my guide, the Archangel Enlil, for those who remember him in the years 2009, 2010, 2011, Enlil proposed archangelic radiances. Every Thursday, I received sometimes 2,000 to 3,000 names from all over the world, from Russia, Australia, Latin America. All the people who live these archangelical radiances certainly keep wonderful memories of them, given the testimonies we had. But accept that you don't need help, you don't need a guide, all this is the world of death, even in the great heaven. Certainly an archangel changes form according to the dimension in which he manifests, but he has no existence of his own. He is part of the dream like everything else in creation. Beyond all this discourse, some must wonder if it is true, if it is false. I will simply tell you that there is only one solution, and that is to live it yourselves. All this real help that has been brought to us by these forms, angels, archangels, extraterrestrial peoples, with Velgan, for example, and the Patriarch of Gaia of the Lyra, yes, like Velgan that I channeled, or like the Patriarch of Gaia, they are no more real than we are, they are dreaming. And since we are the creators who created the dream, we are also their genetic mothers, we are also the Elohim, we are the child who is starving in Africa, and we are the devil who prevents us from living in freedom. What I am telling you here are not concepts, it is something that is lived by most of those who are in the natural state. In short, you are complete on your own, and in truth, there is no one. But you can't accept that, there's no point in believing that. You can only verify it, but for that you have to stop thinking that you depend on any being of light. That's why Omriam said that there was no need for him to intervene anymore. We had the same problem in 2012 when the Trust Dimensions was stopped. Many brothers and sisters could no longer find something to lean on. It was then that I began to realize that many brothers and sisters who were following Trust Dimensions, whether at a distance or in encounters, were only feeding on this light but never had enough autonomy to see that they themselves were this light. And live it. As long as you depend on anyone on those planes, you cannot be free, no matter what you say. I told you 2 days ago that by working on near-death states with Dr. Moody's teams and the first scans we had, we are able to formally differentiate the one who dreams that he is awake from the one who is actually awake. They are not at all the same cerebral images. In the waking state, whatever the manifestations, you will have no modification of the cerebral structures, whereas in the waking state, in the natural state, the modifications of the scanner, or of the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, now, are perfectly recognizable. As soon as I am in relation with any person who is going to express himself, I do not need any clairvoyance or vibratory sensitivity to feel and see clearly if the person is dreaming or awake. I'm not talking about right or wrong here, I'm just talking about the real and the illusion. You can see it like the nose in the middle of the face. It only takes a few sentences expressed by the speaker to understand if he or she is natural or if he or she is wearing a mask. The one who wears a mask, of the ego or of the self, is always hypervigilant with regard to the other's gaze, or the gaze of others. He plays a game, he needs to value himself, he is not natural. He who is natural, it can be felt, it can be seen, his words cannot deceive, the expression on his face cannot deceive. You are more likely to meet beings in their natural state when you meet a small child in the street, rather than in the so-called spiritual environment, which is a hypnotic environment. This is the Luciferian illusion. It is what prevents you from being natural in the present moment, in the eternal present. But fortunately, it's getting easier and easier to live this natural state. There are a lot of brothers and sisters that it comes down to like this, spontaneously, they never looked for anything, but they were good, in every sense of the word. Remember that all spiritual searching, what I am telling you here is formal, it is inscribed in the brain and in the heart. All those who are in the spiritual process, and we all have been, are subject to one fear, the fear of death. The spiritual search is only a fear of death that is not confessed. It is not me saying this, it is the neurosciences of spirituality. Of course, there are many other markers that have been sufficiently evoked in the era of OU trust dimensions. When you're in the natural state, your personal life can only be simple and natural, in all areas of your life. You cannot do otherwise, even if you wanted to. You have no point of view to defend, you have no point of view to fight or oppose. You accept the other as he is, even in his Luciferian illusion, because you really know that it is only you, a little like the so-called subpersonalities that the Italian psychiatrist Assagioli explained. Do you have any other questions? Translator. We have many questions that are very well answered and explained in the site OU Trust Dimensions and Transformations. In Brazilian you have the ultimate readings of light. There are hundreds of interventions that explain exactly those questions that are raised here. Excuse me, I did not hear the last sentence. Translator. These questions that are raised here, in the Shantinelaya site. Yes. Translator. All this is explained, I speak for myself, that all the issues that raise in your speeches, hold on. Because there, your two voices are superimposed, that is to say that Christina continues to speak, and you it must happen before, and you speak on Christina's voice, there is a latency. Translator. Yes, there is, it's not synchronous. And yes, so your voice is also taken by Christina's voice. So leave a little bit of latency before you speak. Translator. Okay, there are some questions that are amply answered in the sites I've already mentioned. They are translated into Portuguese, Spanish, English, and I fully recommend this reading. However, there is a question here that someone asks if Jean LUC is going to do the practice of the natural state. No, I never said that. It was presented like that on Shantinelaya. It's a misunderstanding of the translators. The natural state, there is no practice. It is precisely the cessation of all practice. I did indeed speak of practice without practice, several months ago, for Agapè interdimensional spatial resonance, which was what I called practice without practice, and the way to arrive at the natural state, but there is no energy, no resonance, no vibration, that can lead you there. Interdimensional spatial resonances make you experience Agapè moments. The natural state is the permanent Agapè state. It depends on only one thing, not on a practice, but on total availability, acceptance, sacrifice, humility and simplicity, but it will never be a practice. I believe that OMA and Eba have explained this perfectly. Everything you think you hold, holds you. Until you have completely let go of your beliefs in a savior, in a guide, in even the most prestigious being of light, you cannot be free, you cannot be in the natural state, it is impossible. All those who live it are the ones who have let go of all that. Of course, before letting go, you can always go and read the channelings of OU Trust Dimensions. That will give you some reference points. But the truth, it is you, it is nowhere else. You have to get rid of all this spiritual junk. Freedom knows no spirituality. Spirituality is Luciferian in essence. It is white hat and white bonnet as they say. On one side you have the bad guys, the pedo-Satanists, and on the other side you have the good guys, QAnon, Trump and all that. I grant you, it's much lighter than the pedo-Satanists, but it's the same purpose. To prevent you from being real. The light, the truth, it is without symbol. There is no evolution, you are perfect. I will repeat it until the last minute of my days, I cannot say anything else. I have channeled the last guardians of the dream, we have been traveling with the whales for a year, because they are the ones who have brought us closest to reality, but they are no more real than we are. The only difference is that they knew they were dreaming. That's why everywhere now, on Earth, as Faham announced, there, at the beginning of August, cetaceans, whales, sharks, orcas, are leaving this plane. They are in the process of leaving this plane, for the last 2 weeks it hasn't stopped. Then of course, the one who is in the emotion will say to you, oh the poor animals, but they are free. Bida said it, when his wife died, he was dancing around his wife's bed. He was not happy because his wife had died, he was happy because she was free. When you are subject to your emotions and your perceptions, you are still in a limited point of view, linked to your memories, your learning, your habits, your beliefs. How do you want to be free in that? Freedom is without person, without history and without becoming. What do you want to become when you live the inner perfection? I am not the first to say it anyway, or to live it. Reread The Life of Mayananda Moye, reread History of a Soul by Thérèse de Lisieux, and you will understand, intellectually, you will understand what it means. So it's going to be time, because we're going to resume in an hour and a half with a very long channeling of Baidu with the answers to the questions, and an hour and a half is very good for resting a little bit from each other. Christina/translator. See you soon. See you later. See you later, have a good rest. Through Jean-Luc AYOUN. Les Transformations. English translation, LMF.